Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Pronogo, and I continue the prototypes. What's going on, guys? We are back with prototypes. We are back with podcast episodes. I got a little giddy trying to record that little intro piece, so I hope you didn't mind. The energy is high, and hi. I'm not actually high, I'm sober, but I am happy to bring you another episode of Prototype, another one of my solo game design podcasts. I have just moved. It's been quite the effort. There were a couple of 18-hour days in there just smashing stuff, moving around, while trying our best not to smash stuff. But, you know, around here we say smash to mean progress. Just don't tell your woman that. And then, obviously, we've got some tournament stuff that was going on during my big move prep and effort. So I will have to talk a little bit about that. I want to recap the Tyrant's Tale, Cosmonarchy's current tournament. I want to recap the quarterfinals, the first round of that. And then I also want to preview round 2. I have to admit, though, that later on today, as of the day of recording, the 20th of August, I will be streaming the first part of round 2. We're going to split it up into 2 different days. And the plan is basically to have Tyrant's Tale continue on throughout the week. So by the time you listen to this podcast, round 2 will already be underway. The second day of round 2 will be on Thursday this week, so that is the 22nd. And then the 23rd, we'll also talk a little bit about the significance of that, because the 23rd is a D&D adventure, the Paladin Partner. It's going to be our first session for that. We will not be live streaming the Paladin Partner, but we will be editing together a VOD out of what Three Crow records for us, and I'll also be recording my side of it for the purposes of just having my posterity or whatever. Like maybe I'll look back at it and review it and be like, oh man, there was this weird thing that happened and I couldn't figure it out in the moment, so I just went with something else. You know, there's going to be all sorts of stuff like that. So those are the 3 tasks here for this episode of Prototype before we get into the community section where we do some recap of the maps that have been made and obviously the coffee questions for our donators on coffee. Do appreciate you guys as well. And, oh, you know what? That reminds me, I got to go ahead. Every time I mention coffee, I have to show the coffee little dancing jug there in the bottom left so you guys know where to go if you want to donate. Appreciate that. Link in the description, as always. And, yeah, besides that, though, yeah, we're going to go through the quarterfinals recap for the Tyrant's Tale, preview of round 2, which we're starting later today, and, of course, a little bit about that D&D adventure that I'm going to be running. Very excited about it. I have really absorbed a lot of material and learning, education resources, etc. on how to run games as a DM or what have you. I'm also just a little bit curious about how to even make Roll20 work. So we're going to do a lot of discovery later on Friday, but I figured it's worth talking about in this episode because it's something that I've been up to. But I won't really cover too much about the move. I will leave a link in the description to the video where I talk about that. But yes, indeed, I have moved. That is a thing that has happened. And we're getting back into the swing of trying to get progress made. Earlier today, I did some nice work on Cosmonarchy and pushed an update, including an Optecton buff, actually a slew of them. So enjoy that. I hope people will enjoy them. All right, let's start the actual show. Stop the intro. You know, it's only a classic 3-minute intro. That's exactly what you expect from me. We're going to talk about Tyrant's Tale. Now, I'm a big fan of how Tyrant's Tale has sort of set up, because we had that open qualifier, and then obviously we had the overall idea of, okay, you're going to go from the open qualifier. Only 2 people make it all the way in to the main event. And one of those 2 people was Mystery Meat, and the other one was Week 7. So there were some serious qualifying potential for people to qualify. I thought Shopkeeper Dog, he was very, very close to qualifying. I thought it was crazy that he wasn't able to make it through. And then obviously beyond that, we had Three Crow, who made it pretty close. We had Jack Yelansky, who I was surprised to see defeated by Three Crow, but he made it, you know, within some element of spitting distance. And so those were like the runners up in my mind, although there were, Smarty Cake surprised me as well. Like he could have maybe done something there, but he was dismissed by Veek to the lower bracket. And then Shopkeeper Dog had some cheeses planned. So, you know, some legendary stuff already was happening there. I thought it was pretty cool. At least some awesome stuff. Legendary maybe is too superlative for it. But the the quarterfinals, the other QUA word, the quarterfinals have been, you know, come and gone a long time ago now. I only got around to publicating the VODs for those yesterday, actually, the 19th, when I was, finally set up and had the internet up and running and stuff. I went through and time-stamped those and got them publicated. And so, yeah, I'm pretty excited about how those went. So those were 3-1 of Hit 'em Up taking victory over Week 7, TVZ. So that was maybe what you would have expected, although I don't know. I mean, I was pretty sure that if Hit 'em Up could tame his inner inner, what would you call it, like nerves, then he would have just 3-0'd Veek. But Veek got him with a 7-pull or a 6-pull, something like that. Really, really fast aggro play that nobody would have expected from Veek, actually. So it was pretty smart planning on my homie's part. But after that, there was just the all Hit 'em Up show all the time. Then we had the Shambler narrowly take victory over Arbu's Budesh. Well, I say narrowly, but it was 3-1. It just feels like Arbu's was pretty close to being able to fight back and slap him down, but he just kept doing that move out in the early game. So definitely some things for Arbu's to think about. Those losers, Veek and Arbu's, will be facing off against each other in round 2. So Arbu's does have that immediate experience in the matchup that Veek does not. Maybe favors Arbu's. I would say that, on paper, on the seeding, Arbu's is definitely favored. I would say that's probably true as well, just in terms of the number of games Arbu's plays. He's a bit of a grinder, actually. He likes to play Cosmonarchy, so love to see that. Now, once that means that Hit 'em Up and the Shambler will be meeting in round 2, that's a very exciting one. We'll get into the round 2 preview a little bit later, obviously, but just wanted to point that out. That's where the bracket's going. You can kind of like imagine the bracket in your head. Following that, Hamster and Top Ramen, they faced off against each other, and by golly, that was a tight series. I was kind of thinking maybe Hamster was a paper tiger, but or paper hamster maybe. It's a term that we say when we're talking about someone who on paper is really, really scary, but actually doesn't end up being like that in reality. But no, man, he proved me wrong, and Top Ramen really had to grind for those victories going into a match against Hamster. So TVT and Ramen is victorious. Now, I thought for sure we were going to be set up for, Mystery Meat against Neblime. Well, all right, Neblime's going to clean up Mystery Meat because Mystery Meat's still kind of new. But no, Meat came in and 3-1'd Neblime using the Eidolon Hurakan combo. It's just crazy stuff there, and Neblime not able to find a compositional response to it. But I do think that those kinds of responses do exist. Now, we might not see that because Mystery Meat and Top Ramen have to face off against each other. And then, that's its own mirror matchup yet again, more TVT for Ramen to think about. But I don't know. I'm not sure if we'll see Mystery Meat against another Protoss in the rest of the tournament. Like the King might be back, guys. The King just walked in and defeated the previous champion. Now, again, Neblime does change his race after every championship tournament. So, I'm not sure what he's all thinking about there. But Neblime is here, and he has been swatted down to the lower bracket. And that was in the first order of business, right? So that means that Neblime against Hamster, I felt like this is a matchup that in another life we would see much later in the tournament, but with Hamster being Tyrant and only narrowly losing out to Ramen, and with Neblime being Protoss and being not necessarily like, it was a closer series than maybe 3-1 might imply. It's not like the one that Neblime won was like a cheese game or something. It was a pretty solid one, and his showing in the macro games that Mystery Meat took were also pretty good. Like Neblime wasn't just out of the game. Those took effort in order for Mystery Meat to take the dub. So looking at it from that perspective, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, great. Mystery Meat found a way to make it happen, but Neblime is still a strong player. I would say Neblime is still favored over Hamster, and I would say, again, Arbuz is favored over Veek. But those are our lower matches, our elimination matches. And again, the upper semifinals consist of Hit 'em Up versus the Shambler TVZ and Ramen versus Mystery Meat TVT. So I'm thinking that we're going to see some nice matchups out of those ones. I do think that Hit 'em Up, I mean, the problem is Hit 'em Up just played against Zerg, and Veek as Zerg was being kind of aggro, and Shambler loves to be aggro. So I kind of feel like Hit 'em Up, he's got a lot of motivation to defeat Shambler, mind you, but he's also got just strategy after strategy. I'm privy to what he's been planning a little bit because I was in the Clan Ass channel, obviously looking at some of the messages that Hit 'em Up had, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to do this if this happens and this if that happens. So he seemed to have a pretty good game plan, but it's just like Mike Tyson said, your plan's all well and good until someone punches you in the face, or some quote like that anyway. So I guess anyway, that I just wanted to point that out, that we've got some exciting ones, and maybe we should just preview that. You know how the quarterfinals went. I could go into more detail about them, but I think they're a little bit on the older side of it because they're actually 2 weeks back now. I think we're coming up on 2 weeks of them being played. So it's one of those things where I think it might be better to just go straight into round 2 here. And we'll see where things go from there. So obviously, Tyrant's Tale, round 2, the preview, starting off with Hit 'em Up versus the Shambler, let's go into a little bit more detail. The fact that is, Hit 'em Up has been against an aggro Zerg in Veek. He's going up against an aggro Zerg in the Shambler. Now, Veek was surprisingly aggro. Shambler will be, maybe it would be more surprising if he wasn't aggro. I don't know what the Shambler has planned versus Tyrant. He just played against Protoss. So, like, again, looking at the way that the bracket has gone out, Hit 'em Up just played 2vz. So now he's going to play that again, whereas Shambler has not played against a Tyrant yet. Now, I know he's played against Hamster a little bit. I think he probably played a little bit against Mystery Meat. I'm not 100% sure about that. But these are the kinds of players that he might be able to get at. I just feel like Hit 'em Up is just a better player than everybody else in the whole game right now. So it's really hard to try to prepare yourself for that. But I would say that, like, who's got this most similar style to Hit 'em Up? Maybe Ramen, although he's not as aggro with some of the stuff that he does. Maybe Mystery Meat, although Mystery Meat's not as on the ball when it comes to the meta. Like, he doesn't have his finger on the pulse to the same degree that Hit 'em Up does. I'm not sure, man. I don't 100% know how that one's gonna take shape and where we're gonna go from there. So I feel like there's a good chance that we see, Hit 'em Up just storm the gates and immediately dispense with the Shambler. That could be a very short-lived series, right? On the other side of the upper semifinals, Top Ramen versus Mystery Meat. This is where, I mean, TVT is not a matchup that has been necessarily overly kind to Meat. I'm just thinking about most recent history stuff. He struggled a little bit versus Shopkeeper Dog, but did eventually get it in the bag. It was a 2-1 victory. But Dog, I feel like, could have taken that himself, and so Mystery Meat has looked a little bit like he could have faltered. I don't know how much practice he's had, TVT. And so going up against Top Ramen, who is a guy who practices a lot, he prepares a lot, he's got a lot of pocket strats. Ramen, in some ways, like, he's the guy who does the quarry first all the time, and Mystery Meat was also trying that versus Veek, versus obviously versus Shopkeeper Doug. Like, these are kinds of things that you wouldn't expect somebody to try versus the other guy who also does that, right? And so, especially after seeing how Top Ramen versus Hamster went, this is the kind of thing where Ramen's prepared for crazy aggro stuff that Hamster does now because he's actually dealt with it. He's, like, fought against it. And Mystery Meat's over here like, yeah, okay, well, I can't necessarily do super aggro things. Maybe I can rely on Wraith play. That's something that got him ahead versus Dog. But I feel like Ramen would be better able to respond to that. And then when it comes to the other tricks that Mystery Meat might have up his sleeve, I don't know. He's not favored versus Ramen. But I could still see him winning. It's just, I think it would have to be in the macro games, and Mystery Meat would have to get up to tier 3 faster than Ramen does and use some of those crazy things there, because Ramen's aware of tier 1. He's got pretty good awareness of tier 2. So really the only time that Mystery Meat can use his deeper connection with the game, because he's played for longer than Ramen has, to Mystery Meat's advantage over Top Ramen, is if Mystery Meat gets to tier 3. So that's what I'm thinking, is if Mystery Meat wins, and it's not over some kind of Wraith play that works in maybe 1 game, maybe 2 games. I just don't think that he can win a best of 5 with just a reliance on the Wraiths. So I'm thinking he needs to be able to win by getting to tier 3 in some of these more macro-oriented games. And I just feel like Ramen will have better pacing than the Tyrants that Mystery Meat has faced so far. So that's my prediction there. Going down to the lower bracket, let's talk about Veek 7 versus Arbuz. This is a series that is not impossible for Veek to win. He is not favored. But his EVP practice, I don't know how much he's actually played versus, I think maybe the last Protoss he played was 3-Crow in like actual tournament play. So very different style than what Arbuz plays, and not the same caliber of play as what Arbuz has. So there's an element of that as well. And I feel like when we're considering how Arbuz is going about things, and when we're considering where Arbuz is coming in here, he just fought against the Shambler. He knows that he can't move out versus the 1-base style. And Veek does like to play that 1-base style sometimes. At least he has played it versus Hit 'em Up. So I think Arbuz will now settle into something that's a little bit more scout-oriented. I think as long as Veek doesn't have time to prepare some crazy mid tier 1 switch, right? Like around like an 8 to 10 minute mark switch before tier 2. And as long as Veek can't just spike up to a bunch of Lyrilisks, sort of like the evolved Krankendow style or something. Like, as long as Veek can't do those two things, then Arbuz should win pretty comfortably here. But I still think that Arbuz is likely to drop a couple games, at least drop a game. It's just one of those things that I have like this hunch that like Veek has the puncher's chance to be able to just slap him, at least in 1 game. So that should be an entertaining set, but Arbuz is definitely favored. And let's see where things go from there, because our last set that we have to preview is Hamster versus Neblime. And, Neblime is obviously the higher seed in this set, but only narrowly. Hamster, I don't know. I feel like his TVP, it's another matchup that he hasn't practiced too much and played too much against. I guess the last time I saw him play against a Protoss was probably Arbuz, but that wasn't even in a tournament match. I'm trying to think, when did he last play Tyrant? Because he played random in the May Royal Invitational. We had the Fraud of July, and Hamster didn't participate in that because that was technically underclass, and Hamster is an upper class player. So, yeah, actually, Hamster is looking a little bit mortal, I guess we would say. And remember, I did mention to people that like these kinds of these kinds of tournaments have some bearing on, like if you don't win a match here, you could conceivably be knocked down to below class 1 or something. And I think maybe for Hamster, if he's going to remain as Terran, that would be something to say about Hamster, is like, oh, your Terran is not a class 1 level Terran if you get knocked out with no wins, right? That might be something that we think about here. So I haven't made up my mind on that because I honestly haven't really been thinking too heavily about the ranking. Obviously been very busy lately, as I mentioned earlier. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking it's conceivable that Nebelheim is able to defeat Hamster pretty handily. But also, I don't know, this one is the hardest one for me to call because Nebelheim did play PvT, but Mystery Meat plays a very different style than Hamster does. And so what is Hamster going to do versus Protoss? I would love to be able to tell you guys what I think he'll do, but I just don't know what he'll do because he's Hamster, and I haven't seen him play versus Protoss in a very long time. Last time I saw him play versus Protoss as Terran was versus Arbuz in some of those matches that were on the castovers, like on the channel. And then after that, like, it wasn't even matches that where Hamster played like he played bio style and stuff. He didn't play mech very much, right? And now he's more of a mech player. So it's hard for me to imagine what he's going to do. I don't know that Hamster's practiced the Eidolons. So that would be something like, again, this is a more preparation oriented tournament where we have like the matches every weekend, basically. So you see the matches and you see the games played, and then you kind of like work through that and say, okay, here's what we got. That's something that could be a thing that we try to do, right? So anyway, I figured I would just point all that stuff out and say, hey guys, we've got Hamster versus Nebelheim. It's usually a hype matchup. This time though, I think Nebelheim is definitely the favorite. I'm not sure how Hamster will face off against the man. There's a crazy chance, like he showed some grit and tenacity versus Ramen in that last game. He was like a couple of vulture clicks away from closing it and winning the series 3-2 in his favor and going on to play against Mystery Meat. And then it would be top Ramen in this position. And I would say that's a closer set, but I just don't know what Hamster's TVP is like. So that's a black box of a series. I have no idea what to predict. So that is my preview of round 2. Round 3 obviously is going to take shape as we see things. We are splitting up round 2 in the casting so that we're doing upper semifinal 1 and elimination 1B. And the reason we're doing that is it basically means we're doing Hit 'em Up versus the Shambler and Hamster versus Nebelheim. We're doing that because the loser of Hit 'em Up Shambler plays against the winner of Hamster Nebelheim, and that way we know exactly what that matchup is after 1 day of casting. And then the second day will be Top Ramen Mystery Meat against Arbuz Budesh Veek 7. And that is going to determine, like, okay, whoever loses versus Top Ramen Mystery Meat, that will play the winner of Arbuz Veek. And also then we'll know the complexion of the upper final, which will be, the winner of Hit 'em Up Shambler versus the winner of Top Ramen Mystery Meat. So I could see a path for Mystery Meat to the finals, but he would really have to go through a murderer's row. He'd have to go through Nebelheim, he'd have to go through Top Ramen, and if I predict Hit 'em Up to beat Shambler, which I do, then he'd have to go up against Hit 'em Up and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to do the upper final. And that's pretty crazy. That would be an insane run to try to make happen. So that is what I have for you there. That is going to be it for the recap, so I guess we can just power on through directly into the prep for the adventure, the Paladin Partner, the D&D adventure that I'm working on. Or, of course, if for whatever reason that is not of interest to you, you can skip directly to the community roundup after that. The timestamps are in the description after all, so check those out. All right, so we are back. I have actually paused the recording of this podcast so that we could do the round 2 stream of the day. So that's kind of funny that obviously I just finished talking about the preview for that, and then we actually saw the games, at least some of them in action. A shout out to Askosi for joining me for that. And I also wanted to take this moment to remind people that actually this screenshot here is from Mystery Meat's game against Nebelheim in the quarterfinals. It was on Genesis Y, the final match of their series. Pretty interesting stuff, pretty hype stuff, actually. So as we get a little bit deeper into things, let's talk about the Paladin Partner, because in my opinion, this is going to be a very exciting set of things that happen to the channel. At least it's like new content of a different variety, I would say. It's pretty interesting overall. So I hope that you guys join us for that when the VODs come out. I'm not really sure what people think about like how they'd like to consume that kind of content. These are dreaded terms, by the way. I don't know why we've decided to just talk about things as if, you know, content consumption is like a thing that we just all accept now. I don't know. At least the people I talk with, you know, that I'll be talking with people and be like, yeah, I haven't really consumed much content about that. And it's just so natural to say now. But anyway, I don't know how you guys want to follow us on the journey of playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's my first time DMing really ever, but to be technical about it, I did run like a couple sessions, not of the same campaign, but of like, I ran a couple of initial sessions in high school of 3.5. So that was way back. Way back. And so we're talking about like 2011, 2010-ish. So it's been a very long time since I've even thought about it. And actually in between then and now, I have run private one-on-one sessions of like playing, you know, via like some of the RP engines, if you want to call them that, that were built within StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. Thinking about Cortex for StarCraft 2 and those roleplay maps that you'd make in StarCraft 1. I even modded StarCraft 1 to have like new units or whatever that would be showing up as like, oh shit, watch out, we've got this guy going on. And those ranged from like full-on turn-based explorations and stuff of, you know, Pr0totype is involved in a lot of those, to actually like some weird mixed art real-time stuff where I would basically have a setup going where you would have the enemy nations or whatever involved would be like actively attacking you with like big, or sort of like a weird RTS RP hybrid thing. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I'm sure Pr0totype could attest to the level of intrigue about that. And no surprise, he's also involved in the D&D thing that I'm running with the Fraudsclub D&D, if you want to call it that, the Paladin Partner, which is obviously a reference to the Pickup Partner, which is obviously Ben Taberski's moving company. And if you need to move somewhere within the northeast, you know, of the United States, the New England area, definitely give him a shout. But yeah, I will say though that the adventure that we're planning here is definitely going to be the first time I'm running for any sizable amount of players. I did run for, I want to say 3 to 4 players. Yeah, I think it was 3 players. I ran, again, like one session here, one session there. All first sessions, so we never really got back to doing it any other time. And those were in person, so that was kind of interesting, but I was very young. And then I ran the 1v1s with the one-on-ones with Pr0totype. And so that was some time ago. So now coming into this one, it's a very different experience, right? It's a very different sort of style. So I do feel like overall I'm pretty happy with the sort of way that things are coming up. I feel like when we're thinking about the way that the prep is going, I'm mostly doing a lot of like potential like battle map planning or whatever. And I feel like maybe that's almost missing the point, because as cool as it is to have like a battle map handy for a thing, I think it's a bit more important that you make sure you understand the world itself. Like, who are the characters, who are the antagonizing forces, as well as the supporting forces for the players, the party, and what are their motivations? What is their plan? One thing that I really like about what Matt Colville said, if you go check out his YouTube channel, he's got loads of DM related stuff, Dungeon Master advice, basically. And one of the things that he says is that you kind of want to understand what the players, or sorry, not the players, what the NPCs, the notable NPCs and factions and such, what is their plan before the party is involved? Because that will help you understand how they might pivot if the party meddles with their plans. And so that, I think, just having a really nice, solid understanding of the motivations and the goals and the plans of the villains and the also the supporting cast and stuff, what their individual goals are as individuals, but also on a national or factional level, you know, a more macro scale, what is the overall plan? You know, basically, how is momentum storing itself, and how are we seeing changes happen in the world, and what are the forces acting on those elements of change? How are you going to see them change their direction or their trajectory based on what the players might end up doing? You can answer those on-the-fly questions and kind of do a lot of spot writing a lot better if you're prepared, in the sense of understanding what the context of the world really is. And so I think that's where I'm going to dedicate a lot of my remaining prep time. The first session is going to be on Friday. Again, we won't be streaming it. We'll just be recording it, and then I'll take the VOD, edit it together. I'll probably cut out some of the downtime and stuff because I feel like, I don't know, maybe that would be more interesting or whatever. But again, I'm also open to other people's impressions. Like if you guys want to journey with us and check it out and see what it's like, definitely let me know what kinds of things you might want to be seeing. Do you want me to cut out the downtime? Do you want me to keep everything in there and just sort of like skip around at your own leisure or whatever? I feel like that's a little bit less likely to be useful, but that is sort of where we are at right now. So I do feel like overall, the goal of the project, if you will, the goal of the D&D thing is just to have fun with the concept of not really a tabletop role play because it's like virtual tabletop, but I feel like we're in for a pretty cool time once we get to the point where we understand what the media is like, because we're using Roll20, and Roll20 is something I have very limited experience, by which I mean I only have experienced it in the lead up to this session, prepping and trying to get everything in order. And so, I don't really know how we're going to handle combat, because another thing that happened was that people wanted to use, or I think specifically Pr0totype suggested that we use dice that is not in Roll20 because their PRNG might be really bad, is what I was told. So I'm not necessarily against that, but it does mean that it's going to be harder to keep track of the rolls because we're going to have Discord open on the screen, like on the second monitor. That's fine for us playing. I don't know how we are going to show that in the stream or in the recording of the VOD. That's going to be something where, I mean, I'm not really 100% sure how we'll do that at all. Of course, my private rolls that I do myself, those don't have to be logged anywhere. Maybe I can make reference to them if I add dev commentary to the or DM commentary to the VOD from Pr0totype's POV or whatever, which I probably will be doing every now and then. Although that's another thing that maybe I should get info on from the other people who are around and interested in watching this sort of thing. But that's pretty much it. I mean, that's the Paladin Partner. That's the D&D adventure. We're going to have to figure out how we want to do things, because we've got a Discord bot for handling the dice rolls that are public. And then I'm going to have my own dice roll handling via 5e tools using a DM screen that I've pinned the dice roller to. And so, there's going to be different ways to handle that sort of thing. I'm not 100% sure what we're actually going to be looking at once the time is once everything is taken care of. So I don't know. Will we see? Will that eventually be phased out, and we'll just use Roll20 dice and hope that there's something we can do about the PRNG, or just accept it? I don't know about that one. Are we really maybe we could do an experiment where we do one session with the dice bot, we do one session with Roll20, we go back and forth for maybe 6 sessions or something, and then we're like, okay, let's actually look at what the stat sheet, the chat log of this is, and do we see trends in either one that we want to avoid? Do any of them actually look like they're more useful? Because even if the PRNG isn't bad, even if the RNG isn't bad, if it feels bad, that's enough for humans, as flawed as we are, to just feel like, okay, well, this is just terrible. I'm not going to do this. And so, I don't want to use this kind of thing or whatever. And so that's enough for me to say, okay, we should at least qualitatively analyze it and then feel like where are we going to go from there? That's sort of my vibe right now. That's what I'm thinking. But I'm excited about it. It's something I'm definitely interested in doing. It'll be Shambler's first time playing, my brother's first time playing. Lucifirius has, I think, very minimal experience, but he's played a couple of times before. And then Pr0totype has played a lot, he's DM'd and played a lot compared to everybody else. So I have a feeling he'll be taking the lead. We already talked about him maybe leaving session notes. I kind of have a different idea for what I would like to do about session notes. I feel like it would be really epic if we could have the players be involved in the session summary, where we either do it in character as part of the role playing, where Pr0totype's character sits down to start chronicling what happened, and so he's taking the lead in universe, diegetically, but he's also saying, would you agree with this estimation of what I experienced, and okay, what did you experience here, or whatever, that sort of thing. So, the session notes could be pretty interesting there, where we're actually taking a day of play and saying okay, here's how I feel it happened from the perspective of each character. I feel like that could be a cool thing. And then I could basically take that summary and just read off of it to start off the next session. Maybe do a further summary of it, or maybe just read it off as it is when we intro the next segment. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. Session 1 coming up on Friday the 23rd. Very much looking forward to that. And we will see what happens in the more distant future. But that's what I got for now. And that is where we will stop this section of the show, because the Paladin Partner is on the way. Coming straight at you with the Community Roundup, we're going to be taking a look at some custom maps that have been made for Cosmonarchy. I've got a quartet of them, as far as I could tell, dating back to when the previous episode of this podcast was played and or was recorded and such. So let's take a look first at Apophis. At least it could be Apophis. I'm not really 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's Apophis. This is a map by Jujic. I believe that there might have been some tweaks between then, because for example, these mineral fields are all the same, but that's actually been changed. I just didn't get an updated screenshot of that per se. But over here we have mains in the top left and the bottom right. Pretty fairly wide ramp coming in here compared to over here. Like you've got, this actually looks a little bit wider than that, but there's some weird tiles in general in this map for one reason or another. And that leads into the this area over here. I don't know what's going on over here. There's some funky stuff over here. I'm sure Biddy B's a big fan of that. But yeah, main, natural, and then there's this big open area where you should try to basically set your rally point to while you try to secure your third. And you might be thinking, but Pr0totype, doesn't that mean that you can just get attacked by air units? And I guess to an extent that's probably true over here on the third. But it does mean that if you have an air force, you have a less powerful ground force. And so you can hold a less powerful ground force with a less powerful ground force while you pinch off some of your ground force to deal with the air. So I don't actually know if it's that big of a deal in practice, but it's kind of interesting, right? Over here we've got one of those like double up ramp going up the cliff advantage. This is a rare situation where you could conceivably have +4 weapon range because you're up here and fighting on units that are down here. So this area, which is a light base with 2 geysers, could conceivably be pretty significant actually, and I quite like that. I think that's pretty cool. Definitely something to keep an eye on in the future. For this map particularly, I did add doodads for the dirt to the platform tile set. So we have these things, for example. Obviously, I think work out pretty well as little spots, but I do think that there could be more tiles in general for this sort of thing. I'm not 100% sure what other tiles we could add. I believe mud is already in there, but I could be wrong about that. I know rocky ground was talked about being added. I think I did add that actually, but I don't see any placed here. So I wonder if there was like an area where rocky ground was going to be used in like the middle or something to make this unbuildable. I'm not 100% sure about that. Anyway, we do have neutral treasuries in the bottom left and the top right with the gas island bases. These are only available for advanced workers. I think that's pretty cool. It does add a reason to make artisans as Protoss as well. You'll have to use air units to try to thwart that. And then overall, we've got the double ridge sort of central bases with a lot of minerals. I say a lot. I haven't actually counted. It looks like 5. Okay, so it's 11 mineral fields there. That's pretty good actually. And it looks like 8 mineral fields elsewhere. So, yeah, fairly standard stuff as far as the base counts are concerned. I will note that the third is 8 minerals like normal, right? But then also it has 2 ridges instead of 2 gas. And that's kind of an interesting choice because then maybe it biases you towards taking this base that has 8 minerals and then the gas and ridge instead of 2 ridges. So that might be something where players are encouraged to go deeper in the map in order to achieve some semblance of I guess, control overall. I don't know. It might be an interesting point to take a look at. So, yeah, I'm interested in seeing how play on this map shapes up. I know that Jujic has since started working on another map, I believe. So I haven't seen any preview of that just yet. But I think Benno and Sipiak were fighting on it at some point. So anyway, shout out to those guys for hanging out. And that does it for Apophis. We're going to go and take a look at a Reduxed Omnikin. This is an 8-player map that is turned into a Team FFA map. This is by Biddy B. And so he's got your single spawn up here in the top left. Looks like your, single natural over here, single natural over here. I can already tell you there's going to be a lot of chaos made by this base up here, which has support for some advanced workers up in the top strip as well. It's pretty interesting. So that's 12 and 6. It looks like this is one of those maps which is 4-way symmetrical, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. It's like that box symmetry almost, so that's pretty interesting. Got the Basilica up here in the middle with the anchors, the neutral anchors that might help you hold on to that. This is a really interesting map. I think having more big maps like this are super good for Fraudarchies where we have a lot of players. So I fully expect this kind of thing to get played at some point, because even if you only have like 6 humans, maybe you throw some AI in the other spots or whatever, and that could be kind of interesting too. So anyway, the mineral fields are all kinds of fucked up. And it looks like you only have, wait, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got 6 here, but I don't know. Is that a bug? No, it actually looks like it's intentional that one player has 6 minerals instead of 8. At least it's true for all of the players. So yeah, I don't know about that one. That seems like you're kind of telling one player to do a lot. I remember there was some controversy when I did that in an earlier version of Tectonic Kingdom, a 3v3 map, where some players had different resource counts than others, and some players were not very happy with that asymmetry. So an interesting thing, looks like we've got neutral crucibles out in the middle of the map, which is also neat. And then obviously the random geysers and stuff that you can harvest with the advanced workers. So, there's interesting things at all corners of the map. And of course, there's some Biddy tiles hidden by the Biddy sprites. Classic move. I've started to using Biddy sprites too, so you gotta hide your Biddy tile somehow. And so yeah, that's what I got for you for this map. A pretty interesting one, but I can't even begin to talk about the layout just yet. I don't know about the mineral fields. I feel like even if you had 8 in all the bases for the mains, the actual orientation of them is really messed up. So your efficiency is really bad just looking at this. I would encourage Biddy to make those a little bit more aesthetically pleasing and also mechanically pleasing, I guess. Our last 2 maps are by 3Crow, and they're both UMS maps. This is Tron. It's not much to look at, but I swear it's pretty epic. At least that's what I've been told. People have been enjoying playing this kind of thing. You obviously have the laser walls. I haven't played it yet, so I don't actually know how it works. But the vultures leave behind laser walls, and you have a vulture, and your vulture presumably respawns after a certain point. It's kind of interesting. I'm even more excited about his second offering, which is Pictionary for Cosmonarchy. This is a constant source of silliness and joy. This is definitely something we'll play on Fraudarchy. I really strongly appreciate this kind of thing, and I endorse Pictionary for Cosmonarchy. I fully endorse it. It's epic. It even has 2 modes, as far as I understand, where one mode is you compete until one player has 10 points, and then that player wins. And the other mode is just you keep score some other way, but you play forever, like it's a sandbox type mode or whatever. That's pretty banger, pretty epic. So shout out to 3Crow for doing a lot of work with regards to the mapping stuff. I very much appreciate that. I think it's very epic to have that sort of thing. And now I skipped the sort of welcoming new members section of this because I honestly can't really keep track of them. But if any of them show up and I start to say, oh wait, isn't that guy kind of new, but he's actively playing or whatever, I'll give him a shout out in the next prototype. But for now, that's all I got for you. I've totally missed out on the opportunity to maybe look at that because it's just been so many weeks since I last did. But anyway, we're going to go straight into the coffee questions. But again, shout out 3Crow and a Shambler updated land thaw, but I didn't end up looking at the updates on this show because I usually don't look at like individual updates for apps, but I will shout out that was updated. Shout out to Jujic for his Apophis map, and the Omnikin update is like a total revamp. It's not like a normal incremental update. It's went from I think it was like a 4v2 or something. It was some weird like lopsided FFA, and now it's a pretty interesting, 2v2v2v2 map. So pretty cool stuff there by Biddy. Shout out to all you guys for your work with Cosmonarchy. I am looking forward to adding some more new maps of my own pretty soon. So see you guys then. And now that we are into the coffee questions section, you'll note that the coffee link is once again in the bottom left. If you want to donate for $3 a month or more, you'll get all kinds of crazy perks. And some of them include being able to chat in a private channel with all of us donator homies, and of course the devs, but also chat with me on a per podcast basis where you ask me a question and I answer it. We've got 4 questions today, so let's get to them. We're going to be starting things off with Myrian, who asks about some Pangea stuff. I always like answering questions about my sci-fi universes, and Pangea is no exception. Myrian says, could you discuss what sorts of civilian and military transportation, logistical vehicles, and devices are utilized in the Pangea setting? He also included and/or Onatar, but I'm going to stick to Pangea for this. So Pangea is about a galaxy-wide supercontinent, super construction, like a super construct or whatever. So it's this enormous like thing that where, and it's some kind of artificial installation or maybe natural installation. It's left deliberately ambiguous. Nobody knows how it was created, and just that it is. And so you don't have space like you would normally see. It's more like the whole thing is an atmosphere. You don't need necessarily need like a space suit, right? The whole thing, there's like atmosphere in the whole place. You can think of it as just a really enormously huge, vast, like unimaginably large, I guess just like, shopping mall almost, or something like that. I mean, it's not quite like that, but there is like an internal construction, some sort of wall where you imagine people have maybe tried to like bore out of the wall to see what's there. It's pretty difficult to bore through, but like, what are the filaments of this kind of construct? What's going on here? And those are some of the questions you have to start to ask yourself. Is there something outside of it? Can you even reach the end? Because some people might think that they've reached the end of it, and then they punch through some material, and then there's more of it. Because they're not actually at the end of the dimensions of it, so to speak. So anyway, that's sort of some background on Pangea to remind people what's going on with this, and what are the transportation and logistical vehicles that you might see. Well, the different factions of Pangea will obviously have different answers to this kind of question. One of the factions that is a little bit of like lost in their own hedonism, so to speak. They are fond of burrowing through any sort of terrain and using vehicles that can do that, and sort of relocating via the ability to sort of not exactly ignore, but to subvert the physical terrain around them. And so they obviously have flyers, but actually flying units in general are not as common in the Pangea tech trees as in, say, Cosmonarchy, for example. So they make up a smaller percentage of the roster in general. And so flying units are definitely more on the side of supporting units and facilitators. They're not necessarily frontal combat units always. There's going to be some like harassment units or whatever, obviously, but or maybe that's not obvious, but I should say there are going to be some harassment units, some units that are not necessarily very good in a frontal fight, but maybe more like a Mutalisk or something, or even like a Cosmonarchy Brood War Wraith, stuff like that, right? And so those are the kinds of things that you might see in Pangea for air units that actually fight, but a lot of them will be transports, a lot of them will be supportive units and specialists, a lot of them will be maybe like healing type units or some kind of combat buff unit or debuff unit, maybe like an offensive specialist of some kind. Those would be things that you might be able to take a look at. So those are definitely in there. The hedonist faction, they are definitely the ones that would try to avert anybody's eyes, anybody's prying eyes, and so they'll see if they can maneuver through the ground itself, and you would probably need some kind of active detection to see exactly what's being transported beneath the surface or what have you. And then there's, of course, the ones that are totally drunk on their greed, and those guys are all about the most abstractly, ornate, expensive, impractical, constructions and architecture and stuff like that. And so they would have really rich looking chariots, flaunting their wealth, using the ability to probably hover, which would give them more speed and maneuverability than the corresponding vehicles, like ground vehicles. Their air units would be, their air transports and stuff would probably be very vast and slow moving, but be capable of obviously having a large number of units, or maybe a small number of very large units inside their cargo holds and stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing that you can expect from them. And then obviously the sort of Western chauvinists, if you will, the individualists, they are maybe a little bit more middle of the road, where they're not going to be using as many air units as the what would you call them? The ones that are very, very rich and don't mind flaunting it, and the gluttons, if you will. They're not going to be using the same level of air units as them for transport. Their vehicles are a lot more about just having really good speed overall. So they're mobile, their ability to move around. Like they're the faction that has I've dubbed it the homie-mobile as a concept, but it's just like a sidecar basically, where you can put a garrisoned infantry unit in there. And so like they're the kinds that can do that. They have the capability of charging forward with pretty good speed with their land vehicles, so they can get around places pretty fast. And you can imagine that they're higher tier versions, like successors in some way to that homie-mobile sidecar type unit, would be the ability to load in more units. That maybe it's not in a garrison type thing where they can shoot while garrisoned in, while loaded in, but they might still be able to, transport a large number of units. Maybe they can deploy. I'm kind of thinking about, I think it's the Reckoner, which is such a silly name, in Command & Conquer 3's expansion, Kane's Wrath, has something like that, where you can garrison a bunch of units. You can deploy it once permanently forever, and then it can, the units can shoot out of it. I don't think we would do that exact thing, because I feel like it's very... It probably is pretty powerful, thinking about like the statistics of it. But garrisons in Command & Conquer were dumb anyway, because you just like use fire for one tick and they would explode. So that was obviously dumb. But when it came to the idea of like the fantasy of like driving around in a vehicle that has a lot of wheels on it or whatever, and then they sort of kick the wheels off for the ability to entrench in, I don't hate that idea, I guess. And allowing the infantry to return fire after, that's kind of an interesting concept, but I'm sure we would be a little bit more free-form with how you could use it instead of it being a committal. I don't know if we want to incorporate siege mode type deployments, though, into Pangea. If we do, it probably wouldn't be for the chauvinists, so the weird thing is I don't think you can use... Because like the burrow while moving thing might make you think of Zerg just because they burrow for the hedonists, but I don't think you can use Tyrant, Zerg, and Protoss as like ways to map certain concepts on. Certainly not the thematics, but like certain cornerstone type ideas that we've coined for Cosmonarchy. I don't think you're really going to be able to make that kind of comparison in Pangea, but I don't think we would use deployments all the same, because there's like a system for the chauvinists that's like not exactly like add-ons. It's called substructures, but the substructures are very different in the way that they work, and so at least in the current pitch, of course, a lot of that could be subject to change. So that's anyway, that's my thing for now, my answer to Myrian's question for now. Hopefully it was interesting, and I think you're basically looking at the kinds of garrisons that you're going to see out of the chauvinists or whatever, maybe the mobile garrisons to some degree, and certainly mobile transports in general will be more ground based, with the air based transports being able to. It kind of goes, I think they would end up having like smaller cargo holds, but being pretty nimble and using their speed, or maybe like the Terran Trojan having a higher unload speed is actually pretty interesting, right? And so I think that's pretty cool. I feel like maybe something like that could be echoed in the Pangea chauvinists, but obviously the hedonists having their vehicles that burrow around and their infrastructure that can probably try to be relocated at some point, being kind of slippery and effervescent and hard to, like, a little bit ethereal. That's actually a thing that I would like to have be a core thematic of the hedonists, because they're never really nailed down to any one thing. They can change their mind at any time about anything and still feel like they're justified in doing so, and that reflecting that through the gameplay is going to be something that I would like to do. So it might even come to pass that their structures themselves can also burrow through the ground and maneuver, albeit obviously with no more ability to, say, train units or whatever. So I haven't really decided on that, but that might be something that you see out of there. Certainly it would be a capability of them. It's just a question of, would the time scale, the time horizon for that sort of thing allow you to do it in the middle of a game, or would it be more a lore thing that they can do? But I don't typically like to have things that are lore possible, but not in-game possible, if you know what I mean. So anyway, that's one thing that you can think of, and then obviously the chauvinists, the gluttons have the ability to they'd have massive airships that can like pick up their structures, which might be a thing that only they can do, compared to they can cause monarchy. All the races can do that to some degree, right? So anyway, I figured I would point that out and give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek at that. Hopefully that answered Myrian's question. I didn't really touch on the civilian side of it, but there's not as much of a civilian presence in Pangea compared to in Onutar or into Cosmonarchy or in Xibalba, because Pangea... I think everything inside Pangea is pretty much a warrior society, so you don't really have a lot of non-combatants, I would say. Obviously still some, but not as many as you might in some of the other ones, so kind of skipped that. Most people are very familiar with military life at this point. All right, up next we have the Shambler, who asks a long-winded question, yet again about like sci-fi settings and stuff, so he's continuing to mine me for ideas. He asks, if you had to make a sci-fi setting where all high technology, as in anything past the Stone Age, is biological, with humans being at least one of the factions, what would be some of the core mechanics of the universe you would introduce, so that this unique state of affairs would end up making sense to the audience? So, in essence, the question is asking me about how I might approach crafting a universe where any sort of war tech is going to be downstream of some kind of biological biological evolution of some kind, right? And humans still have to be involved, so I can't just have it be like on an alien world where everything is evolved like that, right? So I would say that one thing you could do is have apparently they tried to do something like, not related to this question exactly, but the Alien Romulus movie came out recently, and I've been because I subscribe to a couple of film-related channels, some reviews of that movie came out, and it doesn't seem like it's anything worth giving a hoot about. But the interesting correspondence here, the thing that overlaps, is there's like some weird engineer human alien hybrid, like xenomorph hybrid, that was made at one point. And it's like featured in that. And I almost wonder if like there's not really anything in Alien that exactly has crazy like a heavy amount of, what would you call it, like there's not really anything within the franchise to my knowledge that is based on like massive evolution. But then you look at like Zerg, and I guess maybe Tyranids, I don't really know about them as much, and they have this heavy amount of evolution as like a core component of them, and it's mostly in the book. Like not the book, the manual that references that in StarCraft 1, and then in StarCraft 2 they have a bunch of like weird missions in Heart of the Swarm called evolution missions, and that whole game feels like a fan fiction. But it's, you can imagine that there's this thematic of evolving. I mean, it's even in the string names for like when you're doing an upgrade, it's a evolve carapace or whatever, and then when you finish that upgrade, it says evolution complete from the advisor, right? So like that's kind of interesting. Okay, like evolution is a part of it, and then in their lore, it's also that they like took they evolved an existing strain of some kind of beast or whatever, and then they took that and they ran with it, and so that's kind of interesting too. And it's like, okay, well they've gotten all this stuff, they've done all these things. What more is there going to be as a result of that? Well, basically we could make it so that there was an alien race that the other thing that's worth pointing out is we could have technology that's just like really ancient, that's not actually a force within the current setting. So this might feel like a cheat, but as I explain it, hopefully it doesn't. It could be that basically we have some kind of progenitor race or civilization that did have technology that tried to perfect a rapidly evolving organism, and then what naturally came from that was these rapidly evolving organisms like basically tethered themselves to, and this is pretty much, I mean, it wasn't an artificial creation, but it's pretty much how the Orlithrae and Xibalba react, where the Orlithrae entities kind of like attached to individual organisms, and their version of like the Zerg infestation is basically them like rapidly evolving the cells and the DNA and stuff of whatever they're attached to better serve whatever the Orlithrae require or what they need, so that the purposes are changed. And so that kind of procedure can happen in the middle of the battlefield. So obviously it can be something that happens pretty quickly. So I would basically take a page out of the Orlithrae's book, but say that it came, we could say that instead of evolving naturally that way, it came from, a progenitor species if we wanted to. We could say that it evolved naturally this way. So you would basically take the concept of the Orlithrae, but apply it such that instead of having the hive mind connection, it the entities still retained a sense of self, that they weren't basically split across all of the different organisms, but their physical forms evolved very significantly, and maybe the individual had some control over that form. And so if the Orlithrae were maybe deliberately or otherwise seeded on many different worlds, you would basically have root species with their own base biases, like, oh, I've got the I'm a human. I'm a biped. I have, these mammalian characteristics. And then you'd have like another root-based race that evolved, that was given the Orlithrae, entity, if you will, call it that, and then turned it into a, like they were a quadruped. So then they like formed quadrupedal armor out of some kind of exoskeleton, and they evolved their form to be that. And then like they made very significant changes to their form, and then they made, like there would be some among them who presumably would like make more significant changes because we need some kind, we need some way to storm this castle or whatever. Like, because again, I'm thinking if it's Stone Age, then you can still have like more primitive constructions, and then you could probably have like more common constructions, because like if a worker has evolved biologically to lift heavier things and like put them together or whatever, like that's pretty significant, right? And so, that would be an option for sure. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Like, basically, you're asking, Shambo's question is asking, like, how do you justify all high technology being biological? Well, if you still have mixed in, like stuff like that, I mean, you could just make it all about humanity receiving this entity, if you wanted to. And you could make it so that, like, this is what happens when they receive some kind of symbiote that allows them to rapidly evolve themselves from a biological standpoint. But you would have to explain why they don't just make better materials. Like, maybe they immediately all became enraptured in war. And the war that they were, enthralled in between each other was like, it would involve taking over some of the other fauna. Like, you think about like what happens when you give this, you take this symbiote, but you somehow try to control it. How it evolves, like the bears and the wolves and the this and the that. And then like there'd probably be some neutral hostile type things that were evolved without the guidance of humans. And by rapid evolution in this context, it would probably be over several years or hundreds of years or however, like the timescale wouldn't be instant. But basically we would probably fast forward that kind of setting from the inciting incident of the first symbiote, like the symbiote seeding of planet Earth. And then we would see like, okay, well, in that case, like maybe there are different races in the sense of like there's humans and then there's evolved, there's other evolved things, like maybe there's evolved dolphins that have evolved the ability to breathe on land and to, they don't exactly, I don't know exactly how you would handle that. Maybe they'd have like 4 legs, or maybe they would have they would have the ability to manipulate things, right? But like they would become a species too. And so that seems more interesting to me, as if we basically were able to like fast forward their evolution towards a certain goal based on their intelligence. We definitely have like maybe another primate species that's not humans, and then there'd probably be like a lizard species. Maybe there would be like a shark species. I don't know. That could be kind of interesting. So I guess that's probably what it would do. Like the mechanism for this would be the symbiote that accelerates evolution at a very rapid pace, and the races of the RTS would definitely be based on that. Now, I don't really know, like, the only thing I can really say about why they didn't do more work on the, why they didn't do the more work on the context, in the context of, like, building better materials, or, like, going up the Industrial Revolution and shit like that. Why did they stay in the Stone Age? Why didn't they age up out of, that? Well, I can't really answer that, other than maybe it's just total bloodlust, chaos, war, nonstop like conflict, because like it's not just humans that are fighting humans. It's also, the different the different animal races that have become evolved enough to attack, right? And that almost gets you into like fantasy territory in a way. It's kind of interesting. Maybe that's like how you explain how D&D works. Is that the animals have intelligence too because they evolved it. Shit like that. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. So that's how I would explain that, and how I would facilitate that. That's the mechanism by which I would do that. And I hope Shambler is satisfied with that answer. All right, up next for our third question is Lucifirius. What are your thoughts on video games as a storytelling mechanism versus more conventional mediums like books, TV, and movies? So this is like an age-old question in, I guess, deep game design discussion topics, is like, how do you make a game where the story is actually a feature and not, I was going to say not a bug, but sometimes it does kind of feel that way. Like, hey, I'm trying to play this game and there's this thing getting in the way of my game. Is that a bug? Well, it turns out, no, it's not a bug, but it is usually very jank in the way that it's actually implemented. And so I would say that as you're thinking about how to design a game or make a game where the core aspect of the game is actually based around something congruous with the story. I was actually explaining this to somebody recently. How I went back to the example of, I said this in one of the old by design videos I made on difficulty, about how sometimes you'd have difficulty where the game wasn't very hard, but your characters were reacting as if you just barely scraped out of a real tough scrap and it was almost deadly. And you're sitting there like, well, actually that was really easy. And then other times you'll be in a situation where your character, because you had it on a high difficulty instead of a low difficulty, like you're thinking about difficulty selection, your character will be like, well, this won't be this won't be difficult at all because, look at the last mission. It was easy. Meanwhile, you're like, the last mission had me bent over the controller sweating. I have no idea what the fuck is going on. And so that kind of example crystallizes it for me, where there's basically a lot of things that can confuse what kind of narrative is being spun, or I guess being experienced by the player. What the player experiences is often very, very different than what the developer intends for them to experience. And I don't think this is something that developers should just kind of ignore. But at the same time, I also think that over designing a game doesn't really get rid of it. Like, I believe that the solution is fairly simple, and it's that the kinds of stories that you tell within a video game have to be, they just have to work out the box almost. At least I would certainly advise anybody who's listening to this who wants to make a game but hasn't made that many games yet, don't try to make something where the story is a really big component to it. You can make it so that the world, the setting, those things are, very, I would point to Rain World. I haven't played it yet, but it's a game that, from everything I understand, and I have looked a lot into it, and I've looked at some design talks about it and stuff. It's like, I read some of the developers' interviews and whatnot, and it's like, yeah, this is a game where the world is reflected in the design of the game. And so, like, that's the kind of thing that where, there's enemies with, like, deep decision trees and stuff. Those are the kinds of systematic things that you can put into your game that reflect a component of what the world is all about, and they do tell a story unto themselves, right? The experience is a story that is worth being told if you put your effort into that. And so, like, you can have a very simple plot, right? But if the execution of it involves deep understanding of the games themselves and like trying to go through all of that stuff, that seems to me like a better use of your time as a developer and of your time as a player, as well as like, okay, I'm going to play this game, and the story that's being told within this game is pretty cool. There's a lot of interesting things going back and forth about it. Here's some interesting thoughts. Here's some cool, I guess, like some cool, what would you say? Like, sure, there's an element of the plot that was memorable, but it's simple. Like, it doesn't have to be really involved. You don't have to have like a million layers. That being said, there are games out there that have been financially successful that completely buck all of what I just said. I just don't think that they're very like successful in the sense of being creative. I think that there's a lot of problems with them. I find that the quality of storytelling in video games, well, okay, let me set that apart, because storytelling is just what we were talking about, right? It's like video games often provide a confused plot to the player because what they're experiencing in the narrative as written versus what they've played are often not in concert. They're very discordant compared to each other. They're out of sync. But then you take a look at the way that the game is being played elsewhere, and it's like, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of games that have really low quality plots, I guess I would say, is like Final Fantasy or Mass Effect or God of War, the new God of War games. The quality of the writing there is not very high. You compare those to like seminal books or movies, and it's such an obvious slam dunk in favor of not the video game that it's like, yeah, this isn't really interesting to me. Like, I actually don't think that, there's this clear inferiority complex that gamers often have where they say, oh my God, The Last of Us was an amazing game, or it had one of the best stories, regardless of medium. And it's like, yeah, I think you're kind of giving the game away there where you say, like, you have to stress that it was really, really good story, even though it's a game. Like, trust me, guys, it's a really good story. Like, yeah, it turns out no, actually, that is not the case in my experience. I especially in terms of like, you can try to break it down in a very cold and calculated way of saying, well, here's the plot and here's what happens at this order. But like the actual, like the dialogue just doesn't land for me. Like, it's very, very unfortunate. I would say cringe, cringe adjacent, especially the second game, but that was obviously a bit more, charged, if you will. So like, I just find that a lot of what video games have to offer is not really reflected in the games that have gone on to critical and commercial acclaim and success. I would say that definitely don't look to what is touted as like industry standard if you're looking for something that is really, really good, because you won't really find that. So I would say focus on a simple plot with memorable characters that are easily and instantaneously relatable with clear motivations. And those are the building blocks for a simple but effective story that you can very easily map to whatever gameplay genre you're trying to fulfill. And hopefully that's clear enough advice. And also sort of my thoughts so far, having played many, many video games, I have not experienced a game that has a good story. That is like the bad gameplay parts are worth playing because of the story. Yeah, I haven't experienced that. And obviously in my opinion, you shouldn't have bad gameplay parts. And but oftentimes you do because of the story. You've got these long extended sequences where you're just walking around doing nothing. You've got long sequences where you're doing some weird mini game shit. And it's like, well, I don't know how to fucking jive this with the narrative or whatever. That doesn't make any sense. And so like there's all these things that just like you pop in and you think to yourself, what the hell's going on? Well, it turns out what's going on is somebody had a really good idea, if you know what I mean. And it's just not really ideal, right? So that is my answer to Lucifirius. I feel like video games are very far away from achieving any sort of apex that they can achieve as far as storytelling is concerned. And I feel like the kinds of stories you can tell are very limited compared to books and movies because you have to account for the player being an agent within the whole thing and like actually controlling things and doing something different. The whole concept of like a linear narrative where the player's inputs don't dictate and change something about the game as the game's story and plot. That is kind of alien to me, and it requires more effort and budget and etc. to build something where that kind of makes sense, where you account for that at least a little bit. It does require a little bit more effort than normal. So I personally probably won't be able to move the needle on this besides talking about it, like in my own actual work. Do I think I'll be able to make like an RTS campaign that is non-linear or whatever? No, I don't really think so. And I think, that's just because it's a very demanding task. Not anytime soon. Like maybe that's something for like 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line or whatever. But when it comes to building out like a more simple like war narrative and having that reflect what's happening in the story, having the gameplay reflect what's happening in the story, that's much more attainable, much easier, and something where you should all start if you're trying to make a game that actually has a story worth giving a damn about. It should reflect the gameplay, and the gameplay should reflect the story. But they shouldn't. The story should never be like, in my opinion, should never be superseding the gameplay in terms of importance. Where now we pause some aspect of the game so that we can experience the story. That is very much dumb. All right, we've got one more donator question here from Pr0totype, who asks about my ideas that I have for Askosi specialists and spellcasters. So, ideas for Askosi specialists. We already have one whereby the avatar, right, the Askosi avatar, a pretty sick idea in my opinion. It's he's got the hijack ability, and there's going to be like group hijacking and stuff like that as well. But the initial hijack ability is where the you leap to the target hostile and you slow their movement speed. And after 5 seconds of a attachment, of being attached, the avatar will become the target. And so that is very, very powerful as a concept, very cool as a concept. Obviously, there's a couple of other ideas that I've got, though. I would say that the Cardinal, even though it's not a spellcaster, it's kind of a supportive, specialist in some degree, where it has that on-hit heal in the area, in an aura around it. So it's kind of like an HP version of the Ecclesiast, but the Cardinal is a melee unit. And so the context there is very different. And I quite like that, actually. So I would say that that's an example of something where, I'd point to that and say, hey, this is an interesting kind of unit and a kind of gameplay pattern to explore, where you've got a unit where when it attacks, it radiates a healing pulse around itself, so that'll keep itself sustained and also its allies sustained. That's the sort of thing that you can expect out of some of the Askosi for their self-sustaining. Their healing is going to be a lot more about combat and a lot less about when you pull away, you're not going to get any passive healing like Zerg or passive shielding like Protoss, and you're not going to get any, active healing from allies outside of combat. It's all going to be based on corpse recycling and about, combat healing. And so the Askosi obviously are very much a brawling type of race, right? And so that's one of the things that you can expect. I would say that some of their air, like the emissary actually is another specialist. It's a transport. It only has 6 transport capacity, so it's down from the Trojan, but it has this ability called rematerialize, and it pulls the ally that's within 4 range to wherever the emissary is. It doesn't load it into the transport, but if you pull an ally from afar, then basically what you're saying is, you can save an ally, you can relocate an ally closer to the fight, you can help elevator like a heavier unit that a unit that you can't actually transport inside the emissary. Say there's like an 8 transport space armor unit. Well, the emissary can still pull it up a cliff or something, it's a bit more APM intensive, but you can technically transport something like that. And so, these are the kinds of things that the emissary is going to be capable of doing. And I feel like that's pretty interesting as a concept. And so that's what I've got for now for the emissary. There's going to be units that have that sort of thing, but more in a group, so to speak, like group rematerialize will probably be a thing. There's definitely going to be, I guess it would be like mass rematerialize if we wanted to use that convention instead of group. Group is like a shorthand. It was not that, but mass rematerialize could be like, or greater rematerialize if we're going to use like a D&D trope or something. It could be something like that for the ability. There's also obviously going to be the frontline reassembly. This is a big deal because there's going to be some specialists that can assist with this sort of thing, where they can take the vehicles that have lost their ability to ambulate and instead have grounded themselves but gained a significant armor boost. That's the kind of thing that the frontline reassembly cornerstone is all about. But then a specialist can come in and take that grounded unit, the armor, the tank unit that has been forcibly deployed by taking too much damage, and they can repair it up and get it back into a working order. And so that's pretty interesting. You can obviously imagine team games that involve like Askosi and Tyrant working really nicely together because of that. And so, you're going to have the ability to hijack a unit to become them. You can relocate units. You can obviously jump to other units or relocate to another unit, as well as relocating another unit to you. There's going to be relocation possibilities for sure. Then there's obviously the healing and sustaining oriented stuff, and the frontline reassembly aspect, where they are able to be forcibly deployed by taking damage, but then they gain defensive bonuses and stuff like that. So that is my shorthand for the current ideas that I have. I've been kicking around other concepts, but nothing is actually set in stone about those just yet. So that is my answer to Three Crow's question about Askosi specialists. And I hope he has had a crow blessed day, because, I don't know, Three Crow's the homie. That's all I can say about that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the show outro. So thanks to all of the homies who have donated on Coffee, and thanks to all of the chromies who have joined me in this quest for another episode of Prototype. The next one will not take as many weeks because I will actually be here and not in the middle of moving and stuff. But shout out to all the guys who have been keeping the community alive. I appreciate y'all, ladies and gents, and I am very much hoping that we have another great set of weeks to come, because obviously Tyrant's Tale is going to continue. So this episode will likely drop publicly on Wednesday, the 21st. The 22nd, Thursday, is where we are going to be doing day 4 of Tyrant's Tale. That will include another upper semifinal and another elimination game. So definitely stay tuned for that. And then we'll schedule the following matches after that, but we obviously have D&D on Friday, so that is the sort of next couple of days that I accounted for. See you guys on Fraudsclub on Saturday as well, and other than that, I will just leave it there. GG's, and we'll be back.